I wonder about a lot of things. How we ever thought the Earth was flat, how the universe began, what our purpose is as humans, philosophical stuff like that. I also wonder what first comes into your head when you see this word. I presume most of you in here know what that is, but I wonder what it means to you. Maybe you think of a celebrity, a book, a movie, or maybe someone who you actually know. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything. This word. I'd like to share a little about what it means to me, but also the misconceptions and stereotypes that come with it. The autism spectrum is the name for the large variety in autistic severity ranging from high-functioning autism to low-functioning or non-verbal autism. These are known also as ASDs. So often, there are only two extremes portrayed to society. The maths and science genius whose intelligence exceeds that of Hawking and Einstein, or the utterly dependent, retarded mute, completely isolated from the world around them. Mostly, though, the portrayal is negative. Now, before I move on, I'd like to share with you a part of a letter from a mother to her child with autism. As my first child, I had no idea what to expect from my baby's development. I did not consider it unusual that you were not particularly verbal and seemed to concentrate intently on observing everything around you with the same intense interest. You also reacted very badly to getting your head or face wet or being laid down in the bath. You didn't speak until you were 2, but clearly understood and could communicate your assent with the word da to the right suggestion from Dad and I. You never said no. You just stayed quiet until we asked the right question. You loathed the noise of a hand dryer and would always cover your ears, and as you became an older child, you were extremely chatty with people you knew, particularly adults, but very quiet and serious around others. As you started school, you could often verbalize your feelings, but these were rarely emotions you showed in your face. As other children moved away from playing alongside others, you maintained your toddler style of playing, happy in your own company and pursuing your own interests, and often wanting to start your own game with others. This became a problem as you got older, as you would say that accidental things like being bumped in the playground were deliberate. When you began to show low self-esteem, I was concerned that you were depressed. So after a few failed attempts to buddy up with someone and playdates that I initiated, you were taken to a child psychologist. As you were so young, we were told that you just needed more help socializing. When the problems at school and your obvious misunderstanding of social rules and conventions continued, we had you seen privately by another psychologist to help you address your self-esteem, which then was at rock bottom. We tried everything to help you be kinder on yourself and to treat others as well as you always treated and valued other children. I once asked you, if your friends are worth £1, what are you worth? You answered 1 penny. I knew then that you needed help to see yourself for the fantastically interesting and talented person you are. I was unsurprised when the psychologist said that you had Asperger's syndrome. I bought you a book written by a child with AS, explaining how he viewed the world, and you said, "This is just like me." I knew then you felt relief as to why you'd felt so different and excluded all your life. I did not look at you and see a list of symptoms or problems, but as a young person learning about the world, with some things proving exceptionally easy. I don't believe being on the autism spectrum is a disability, but rather it enables you to have some exceptional abilities that I can only dream of. Now at 15, I know that you are often anxious and tired just trying to fit in and be like everyone else. But I hope you don't try too hard to do that, because who'd want to be anything other than your own true self? That's how my autism is seen by my mum. Without her, I probably wouldn't be standing up here and talking to you all today. You may have heard the saying, if you've met a person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and that is absolutely true. Because it's such an individual thing, I can only talk about it either very generally or personally. What I want to clarify is that this is not a pity party. I'm not going to wallow in my own sorrow about terrible things that have happened at points in my past. I also want to clarify that although autism is so individual, people on the spectrum do experience similar, if not the same difficulties in certain areas of life. Just like every human being, we have our little quirks, habits, and things we find challenging. But because they fit the characteristics of autism, they are classed as a disability and viewed as socially unacceptable or funny. My way of coping with distress and anger is stimming, which is repetition of movements or sounds common with people with ASDs. I have a couple depending on how stressed I am, but sometimes my more subtle calming methods just aren't enough. Thankfully, very rarely. In extreme distress, I scratch at things or myself and hit things or myself. In extreme anger, I kick things such as brick walls or sometimes people. Sometimes my body does the complete opposite. I just feel so overstimulated, it shuts down on me completely. So I'm literally frozen, unable to move or speak, while my brain works overtime, trying to get rid of the sensory input. It may not even be noise some would consider loud or noise at all, but to me it's excruciating. All the while, I'm trying to fight it, trying to regain control of my brain and body. And I have been in situations where people have pointed and laughed at me, because these more extreme coping mechanisms were apparently amusing. At school, some children called me creepy, and they didn't want to be friends with me. So they bullied me to try and make me go away, but I kept coming up to them because I thought they were my friends. I didn't understand what they were doing was bullying. At that point in my life, I didn't really understand how to socialize. And apparently that was also something to make fun of, because the only children that I played with at lunchtime were children 2, 3, 4 years younger than me, or more often than not, sitting on a bench alone, waiting for my friends to come and play with me. But they never did. Until I was 10 years old, I didn't have any friends at school that were my own age. Everyone has difficulties, but because I am on the autism spectrum, mine are perceived as weird, because on the outside, I look normal. Bullying is a problem, and too often incidents are overlooked for those on the spectrum. Mainly because people think that times have changed and we are so much more accepting of people with disabilities, and we absolutely are. But in 2013, a national study conducted in Baltimore, USA, showed that 63% of children with an ASD had been bullied at some point in their lives. These children were also 3 times more likely to be bullied than their siblings who were not on the spectrum. This is what frightens me. It frightens me because children with an ASD who have not been bullied are in a minority. It frightens me because children like myself are being bullied for things that we cannot control. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, I am not in that minority. And I can honestly tell you that the things that happened to me and the things that were said to me are things that will probably never leave me. Now, I knew from the moment I understood I was autistic and what that meant, that some children would not accept me. I'd already learned the hard way. But never in my life would I have even contemplated the possibility that even figures of authority could also act in the same way, thinking that we were just little brats that needed to be firmly dealt with. But we have to move on. Remember the 2 extremes? This is the first misunderstanding about autism. As already discussed, there are numerous degrees of severity. In fact, the reason it is now known as the spectrum is because of all the subtle variations. Think of a spectrum of light. At first, we see something very simple. But on looking closer, we realize how complex and subtle each variation is. My specific variation of ASD is called Asperger's syndrome, which was identified by Hans Asperger in the 1940s. It is sometimes called high-functioning autism, or colloquially wrong planet syndrome. Personally, I prefer high-functioning. It sounds like Sherlock. The second misconception, although a little outdated, is that only boys can have autism. In case you were wondering, I'm not a boy. The reason behind this, I believe, is that the ratio of autism diagnosis of boys to girls is 4:1. Put it this way. Of 100 people diagnosed with autism, 80 of them will be male, and only 20 female. However, Tony Atwood, a professor in neuroscience and author of the book Asperger's Syndrome, states that he believes it's actually 50-50, but the girls are much more clever as they are able to camouflage and mimic social behaviours to hide their confusion. He also states that he believes that there are a lot of women with undiagnosed Asperger's syndrome due to misdiagnosis of other problems, such as depression, anxiety, and selective mutism. Sadly, treatment without understanding the cause is often ineffective. The third misconception I would like to discuss is the theory that vaccines cause autism. Personally, I find this one quite funny. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, but it's funny because of the sheer stupidity of this theory. A couple of years ago, I talked to someone who actually believed in this correlation. I was dumbstruck because the person I was talking to was a friend. So I wondered how they could think something like this, to think that a part of me, a part of my personality, was effectively a mistake. But to know why this is a fallacy, you need to know what a vaccine actually is. A vaccine is a measured amount of a dead or weakened pathogen of the disease you're being immunized against. It is administered to help to train your white blood cells to fight off the live microbes should you ever come into contact with them, therefore protecting you from a nasty disease such as measles, mumps, or polio. However, in February 1998, Andrew Wakefield, a British gastroenterologist, came along and he published a paper that described 8 children whose first symptoms of autism appeared within 1 month after receiving an MMR, or measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. All 8 of these children had gastrointestinal symptoms. From these observations, Wakefield believed that the MMR vaccine caused intestinal inflammation that eventually led to inflammation of the brain where it affected development. Okay then. About 1% of the world's population have an ASD. Countless research has since debunked Wakefield's theory, particularly due to the fact that his paper was based on a fraudulent study. For example, one CDC study in 2013 looked at the amount of antigens from vaccines during the first 2 years of life. The results showed that the number of antigens were the same between children with autism and those who did not have it. One specific ingredient that has been looked into is thimerosal, which is a mercury-based substitute that is used to prevent contamination of multi-dose vials of vaccines. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mercury, poisonous. It's used in the making of the Mad Hatter's hat, the reason why it's a bit, crazy. However, since 2003, there have been countless studies that have shown no link between thimerosal-containing vaccines and ASD, as well as no link between the MMR vaccine and ASDs. So therefore, I believe that we can safely conclude that vaccines do not cause autism. Sadly though, many parents still refuse to vaccinate their children. And when I listen to people such as Jenny McCarthy talk about how vaccines caused her son's autism and how she's healed him doing all this different stuff and she's encouraging other parents to do the same, I can't help but feel a little bit indignant. She says, and I quote, she is doing what she's doing for the kids. My question is this: has she actually asked them what they want? I do not want to be healed from my autism. I don't need to be healed from my autism because it's not a disease. I do not have a problem with the way I am. It is the people who want to cure us that make us feel like we should. The fourth and final misconception I would like to discuss is the theory that people with the same diagnosis are somehow all exactly the same. I believe this is down to the portrayal of autism in the media, such as the stories you hear about on the news. It also happens in movies, such as Rain Man, in where one of the protagonists, Raymond, played by Dustin Hoffman, is an autistic savant, and he behaves true to all of the autism stereotypes, such as not answering to his name right away, being rude and ignoring people, being a maths genius. You get the idea. The same is also true for the character of Nathan, played by Asa Butterfield in the 2014 movie X+Y. Nathan is also a maths genius. In reality, Studies estimate that only 10% of those on the spectrum are savants. However, it is also estimated that less than 1% of non-autistic people are savants, which is where I believe this misconception stems from. Even without statistical evidence, it is common sense that every single person on the planet is unique, despite many having similar traits. In school, we are taught to always, to quote the brilliant Oscar Wilde, be yourself, because everybody else is taken, which is one of my top 3 favorite quotes of all time. I am all for being myself and embracing my little quirks and getting help to face my challenges. But there is one question always on my mind when someone says, whether it be in real life or on the internet, but you have Asperger's, so that means you're amazing at maths and science. Why? Why do I have to be like that? For those who know me, know I am categorically no maths or science whiz. I love English, and I want to be an actor someday. And I have other talents. Talents that people have told me that they want to have. I can tell you any note on any instrument without any point of reference. I can write you an essay in one night and get an A star. I can tell you exactly when my parents' silver Mitsubishi Outlander was parked in Gatwick Airport for 2 weeks 5 years ago when we went on a family holiday to Florida. My point is, I do not have to have a specific set of talents to be autistic. I can only be me. And having Asperger's just happens to be a part of me. So I suppose my final message to everyone is this: never fit any stereotype. Never allow yourself to be checkboxed or pigeonholed or to view others in that way. I wonder what would happen if we were all brave enough to be an original document and not just a photocopy of everyone else. After all, originals are always the best quality. I wonder how society would change if we felt free being ourselves and accepting ourselves as individuals. I believe that this would conquer all stereotypes, which would eradicate the misconceptions drawn from them. We might even come to the realization that the stereotypes are often, if not always, wrong. And as for people with autism, well, we might not be so different after all. Thank you.